working ideal. It's fair to say, though, that the one thing the French change has done is to increase the discussion around the world where new constitutions are being developed of how to deal with the question of the role of a ceremonial president having some kind of role as a guarantor of the overall security and integrity of the state in a situation where there is some uncertainty, and so the president is given the role of commander-in-chief of the army. Now, there are countries where that is indeed simply an extension of the ceremonial role, and where the real control of the army belongs to the government, the prime minister, and the minister of national defense. But there are other countries where, in fact, to say that the president is the commander-in-chief is to say something very real. My friend, Professor Yash Ghai and Jill Cottrell, who are here again today, have been working hard on the issue of this question in Kenya, and the question of, well, if we have a ceremonial president, or the president functions as a head of state, we have to give him or her some kind of role. What is the risk of that role being abused? What is the risk of there being no real understanding between the president and the prime minister? We also have the issue of what's called cohabitation in France. It's nothing untoward about this expression, I can assure you. All it means is that the president is from one political party and the prime minister and the cabinet are from another political party, because the presidential election gives rise to a different result from the parliamentary election. And so when you have that, you have the potential for deadlock and for dispute between the prime minister and the president, between the cabinet and the president, between the parliament and the president, and that can make life very difficult indeed. I want to conclude by making two other comments. The first one is a very general comment about constitutional politics. Professor Osiatinski spoke yesterday about some of his experiences, and so I hope you will forgive me if I speak a little bit about a couple of mine, and say to all of you that I believe very, very strongly that constitutional politics only works if there is a recognition that partisanship has to be left at the door in reaching conclusions about the national framework. If constitutional politics simply becomes an extension of partisan politics, of everyday politics, there is a terrible risk that it will be seen as an opportunity for revenge, as an opportunity for partisan advantage, and as an opportunity to gain some kind of upper hand in the context of making a constitution. A constitution is not, making a constitution cannot be an exercise in retribution. It cannot be an exercise in revenge for things that have gone wrong in the past. Making a constitution has to be a forward-looking exercise in which people are looking ahead to building a nation, and in the case of Nepal, if you decide on a federal model, to building successful provincial and state governments, and also building successful local governments. And that means that you have to accept the possibility that other people will be in power. And all you're trying to do is set the rules of the game for how that power will be exercised. It cannot be simply about how do we use the Constitution to gain power. Because if you do that, the one thing that is absolutely guaranteed is that the Constitution will not last. There'll be another one in 2 or 3 or 5 years. It's only if it's seen as an exercise in nation building and in the broadest sense of that term, and is not seen as a partisan exercise, that it has a hope in Hades of succeeding. That has to be the foundation of it. And the second thing that I would say is that it has to be an exercise in inclusiveness, which is why at the end of the day, I have to confess that I am an advocate of the parliamentary model, because I think history will show, and I think comparisons will show, that the parliamentary system, with the effective checks and balances that are required with respect to the independence of the judiciary, making sure the electoral system is designed properly, ensuring the participation of women, ensuring the participation of minorities, ensuring the participation of those who have been historically disadvantaged, that is more likely to take place in the context of a parliamentary system than in the context of a presidential system. I believe that very firmly. I believe that comparative study will show that, and I believe that historical analysis will demonstrate that as well. The lesson of inclusiveness means that you have to persuade people. This is the final point. Making a constitution can be a very abstract exercise. It can be an exercise that's very far removed from the daily lives of the people. I know in my own case in Canada, when we did a long exercise in trying to make the Constitution better, and we went out and then consulted the people about the changes we all thought were very good, the people said, we don't like them very much, goodbye, do something else. And so we have to be able to ensure that people identify the improvements in their daily lives with the positive changes in the Constitution. And I think that's something that's very, very necessary. And I hope very much that with those words of advice, and I'm happy to engage in a dialogue and conversation with people who have differing opinions, that you will accept my thoughts with the spirit in which they are offered, which is a spirit of a very strong feeling that the people of Nepal deserve a democracy, that the people of Nepal deserve a government that belongs to them, and that in that, the great exercise and process which is underway today, Nepal has a great many friends, of whom I am certainly one. And I wish you the very best in your deliberations and the greatest success in the efforts that are made to bring a democratic constitutional structure to the people of Nepal. There is a printed copy of my remarks somewhere, so if people want to see them later on, they can have a look at them, but I tried to shorten them a little bit so that they would not be too far removed from your experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bob Rae, for your very stimulating statements. Democracy is not an exercise in imperialism. I think that is a very crucial statement, because you can't impose a model of democracy in different parts of the world. It is an evolutionary process, and it has to be evolved according to the historical stage of development of society. A model developed in very well-developed countries of Europe and America may not fit exactly in the backward third world countries. So we'll have to find our own model of democracy suited to our own situation. So that way, in Nepal, we are now discussing on the presidential form of government or the parliamentary form of government or a mixed form of government. The subcommittee, I think, has worked out its proposal and is about to submit to the Constituent Assembly soon, in a day or two. So we'll be discussing on that. So naturally, opinion is divided whether to go for a presidential system or a parliamentary system. But in the case of Nepal, the insurgency of the people's 10 years of People's War was directed not only against absolute monarchy, but it was also partially directed against the conventional Westminster system, which failed to deliver the dividends to the basic masses of the people. So in our context, we have been discussing not only about the usefulness of a republican system, but also usefulness of the traditional Westminster system being practiced, especially in the third world countries. So the way it promotes instability in a very fragmented society like ours, politically, socially, culturally, economically, this model has not served very well in many of the third world countries. So the opinion is strongly divided in Nepal, and of course your comments would be very helpful for us to reach a very objective and scientific conclusion. I thank you for that. Now I'll request Justice Pekka Hallberg, President of the Supreme Administrative Court of Finland, to make his presentation.
Excellencies, members of the conference, good morning, dear friends. It's a great honor indeed to visit beautiful Nepal, a country which for decades has had the most cordial of relations with Finland, the considerable distance notwithstanding. The bonds between Nepal and Finland are very strong. Both Nepal and Finland joined the United Nations in 1955, and diplomatic relations were established already in 1974. And our countries have been engaged in development cooperation for more than 25 years. So it's a great pleasure for me to have the first visit to Nepal, and after the conference I will stay a couple of days, and let's say it so that the constitutional momentums, like we heard yesterday, also have to be seen from the personal gardener point of view, so that I will travel in Nepal and enjoy this very beautiful country. It's a great pleasure to follow the Nepali constitutional process, which I believe I do so has begun under auspicious circumstances. And in the spirit of dialogue, like my colleague Bob Ray said, I will also have some issues just concerning government and separation of powers and position of parliament and president and government. Dear friends, after listening the strong, elegant presentation of our Canadian colleague, now you have to stand a boring speech of a Finnish judge. I've served already over 40 years judiciary and been 16 years Chief Justice, so that you might see me as an isolated person from the politics, but I've been involved in all the reforms of Finnish constitution, and so I have one picture anyhow to analyze political life also in my country. The current Finnish constitution of the year 2000 is the internationally modern constitution of a democratic and parliamentary welfare state, we can say. The constitution contains, like the other constitutions in the world, basic provisions on the exercise of legislative, executive, and judicial powers, subject to the principle of separation of these three branches of powers. The rule of law and independence of the courts are very essential elements in Finnish legal culture. And we very well know that you can't export judiciary or democracy, like my colleague said, but it's more or less educational process when we have this international cooperation. A few words about the political and historical background in our country. Of course, in any country, the basis of the system of government lies on its social structure and on the political experiences on the nation. And when Finland came independent in 1917, we also got the first own mixed constitution. I use the term mixed constitution because the constitution was drafted and adopted under conditions of very heavy ideological and hegemonic crosswinds among the national community, a power structure with the ruler at the apex had been solidly established, but from European side, there was influx of democratic thought to be concretized in a republican constitution and a parliamentary system of government, with the ministers being politically responsible to the legislature. To simplify matters greatly, the result was a constitution where many progressive structural elements were combined with old-fashioned ones. Bob Wright already talked about risk of a presidential system. We really had that risk that time. Accordingly, the search for the working balance between the presidential and the parliamentary focus of authority emerged as a main problem of constitutional practice. But our old constitution was also a very flexible one. It gave to Prime Minister also position to be a real leader in some circumstances, even if the position of President was more important and the President